Why did no one hear it? The faint edge in her voice, the warning hidden in her silence. The briefing room was full. Maps scattered across the long table, markers tracing corridors of desert routes and choke points no satellite could see. Men leaned forward in their uniforms, some whispering, some pretending to look calm. The air smelled faintly of sweat and dry erase ink. Every eye was fixed on the horizon lines drawn on paper, but her eyes weren't on the maps. Captain Elena Rios sat 2 chairs from the end. She hadn't spoken in 10 minutes, though she'd seen something none of them had noticed. It wasn't in the maps, not in the intel briefings. It was in the silence of a man 2 seats away. Sergeant Holt, hands folded too tightly. He avoided her gaze. He hadn't looked up once since the meeting began. "Deployment window is tight," the commander said. His voice boomed, confident. "We move at dawn. Horizon sweep, convoy security, air cover if needed. Clean, simple." Simple, that word echoed in Elena's mind like a lie. She'd been in too many rooms like this to believe in clean or simple. Missions always bled. Plans cracked under weight. And betrayal never announced itself. It crept, slow and patient, until the wrong second arrived. She pressed her thumb against her dog tags, feeling the cool metal bite into her skin. Why hadn't she spoken yet? Maybe because part of her still wanted to be wrong. The commander's pen tapped the map. "We secure the valley pass. High ground here, here, and here. Rios, you'll fly point cover if comms go dark." Her chest tightened. He just handed her the most vulnerable position in the plan. Out front, alone, where a single misstep could turn into a funeral. She nodded once, her face neutral, but her pulse drummed loud in her ears. Someone coughed, chairs scraped. The meeting ended, papers folded, voices rose, boots echoed down the corridor. One by one the others left. Elena lingered, watching, waiting. Sergeant Holt stood last. His eyes met hers just for a second. They were flat, unreadable, but the flicker was there, something hidden, something wrong. She didn't confront him. Not yet, because suspicion without proof was a weapon that could backfire, and if she accused the wrong man, she'd be the one silenced. She walked out into the night air. The desert wind hit her face, dry and sharp. The horizon stretched dark, stars scattered like broken glass. She should have felt calm under the open sky. Instead, she felt caged. Her boots crunched on gravel. She reached the small barracks, pushed open the door, and sat heavily on the bunk. The others joked in the distance, a card game spilling laughter through thin walls. She stayed quiet, always quiet. Her hand brushed the folded letter in her pack. She hadn't read it in months. Her sister's handwriting, faint, trembling. "Elena, promise me you'll come back this time. Mom can't lose you too." She swallowed hard. That letter was the weight she carried into every mission. Not medals, not ranks, just a voice asking her to return. But tonight something told her, coming back wouldn't be that simple. The dawn broke pale and thin. Engines roared, dust rose, and the convoy began its crawl toward the valley pass. Trucks rattled, armored doors shut, rifles gleamed under the rising sun. Elena walked to her bird, the lean frame of the Black Hawk waiting, blades slow turning like a predator waking. She strapped in, headset tight, eyes scanning the ground crew. Holt was among them, passing ammo crates, tightening straps, moving with precision. But she noticed his hand brush his pocket twice. Not nerves, ritual, as if checking something hidden. Her co-pilot glanced at her. "Long night." She forced a small smile, something like that. "You always look like you've seen the ending before it starts." Maybe he was right, she did. Clear for lift, the tower crackled. She pushed the throttle. The machine rose, blades cutting the desert air, shadows stretching long over sand. Below, the convoy rolled steady, engines humming like distant thunder. From above, the world looked endless. Jagged ridges, dry riverbeds, dunes painted gold. She breathed steady, eyes sweeping the horizon. But she wasn't searching for enemies in the mountains. She was searching for the betrayal within. Minutes stretched, radio chatter buzzed, everything sounded normal, too normal. Convoy secure, the lead truck reported. Valley entry in 5 mics. Her eyes narrowed. The valley pass narrow, steep cliffs on both sides, perfect for an ambush. Textbook, too perfect. She scanned her instruments, then glanced down again. And there, movement, not on the ridges, in the convoy. Halt. He leaned too close to the comms officer, whispering, a subtle pass of his hand, something slipping from his pocket. Her stomach dropped. She opened her mic, then hesitated. If she called it now, the mission could collapse into chaos. If she stayed silent, she risked blood on the sand. Her hand trembled on the stick. The Black Hawk tilted slightly, blades roaring louder. The world below shifted. She forced her breath slow. Rio status, the commander's voice cut through. She swallowed, her throat was dry. All clear, she said. It was a lie. The words tasted like ash. Why didn't she stop him then? She asked herself that later, 1,000 times. Because proof mattered more than suspicion. Because one wrong call could brand her unreliable. Because women in rooms full of men were always questioned twice, believed half. But deep down, the truth was harder. Part of her wanted to wait, to see, to know with certainty. That certainty came minutes later. As the convoy entered the pass, the comms glitched, a burst of static, then silence. Elena's headset hissed empty. She checked her systems, nothing wrong. The blackout wasn't natural, someone jammed them. Her chest tightened. She scanned the trucks below. Holt shifted again. His hand brushed the same pocket, his lips moved though no mic was live. He wasn't nervous, he was counting. And then explosions. The valley erupted in smoke and fire. The first truck shredded into flame, bodies flung into sand. Screams tore through the air, muffled by static. The blast wave shook her chopper, rattling bolts, slamming her chest against the harness. Her instincts screamed descend, return fire, cover them. But her mind screamed something else. He did this. She yanked the bird low, eyes scanning cliffs, guns rattling. Shadows flickered in rocks above insurgents. But her focus snapped back to the convoy. To Holt. He was calm, too calm, even as others scrambled. It hit her like a blade. He wasn't caught off guard. He was waiting. Her finger hovered over the trigger, not for the ridges, for him. But she froze. Because pulling the trigger meant crossing a line. The line between suspicion and judgment, between soldier and executioner. Her chest heaved. Dust and fire swirled below. Men screamed. The bird shook. And Elena Rios, for the first time in years, didn't know what to do. Hours later, the mission was over. Smoke still curled from the valley like ghostly fingers. The convoy limped back battered, bodies zipped in bags, rifles smeared with soot. Elena landed last, her hands stiff on the controls, knuckles white. Her co-pilot exhaled hard, whispering something under his breath that sounded like a prayer. On the ground, silence reigned. No one spoke of blame. No one asked the questions burning in her chest. She walked back to her quarters. Each step felt heavier than the last. The mission report was brutal. 3 dead, 7 wounded. The valley secured eventually, but at a price. Too high a price. The official line blamed insurgents. Poor intel, bad luck. But Elena knew. She'd seen the truth in Holt's eyes. And yet she said nothing. Why, she didn't know. Maybe fear, maybe doubt. Maybe because her voice alone wasn't enough. But one thought haunted her more than silence. If betrayal had already crept inside their walls, this mission was just the beginning. And the next time, the cost could be worse. Why didn't anyone else see it? That question circled her head as the night stretched long, the desert winds rattling loose shutters on the barracks. Elena lay awake on her bunk, staring at the ceiling fan. It spun slow, each creak like a clock marking time she didn't have. The report was filed. The dead had names now, printed on thin sheets of paper that would be folded into letters for families back home. families who wouldn't hear the truth. They'd be told their sons died heroes in a fight no one predicted. They'd never hear that someone inside the convoy helped light the match. She shifted on her bunk, hands behind her head. The letter from her sister pressed against her ribs, still folded in her pocket. It reminded her of everything waiting back home, if she ever made it there. Boots thudded in the hallway. A laugh echoed Holt's voice. Her jaw clenched. The man who'd whispered into the silence, whose pocket carried secrets, was walking freely, drinking coffee, smiling, while 3 soldiers were zipped into body bags. She sat up, elbows on her knees. Her pulse quickened. Should she go to the commander, confront Holt herself, or wait, gather more, and risk another ambush? Her heart said act, her mind said patience. Both screamed. At breakfast, the tension was masked under routine. Soldiers chewed silently, spoons scraping against tin bowls, the smell of burnt eggs filling the mess hall. The hum of conversation was low, broken by nervous laughter. Elena sat near the window. The desert stretched endless beyond the glass, dunes shifting under the pale sun. She couldn't taste her food. Every clink of silverware grated on her nerves. Holt sat across the room, laughing, animated. His hands moved freely now, gestures wide. To anyone else, he looked like a man shaking off the dust of battle. To her, it looked like a man who'd survived his own fire and felt untouchable. Her co-pilot dropped into the seat beside her. You didn't sleep. She forced a dry smile. Neither did you. Yeah, well, it's hard not to hear the screaming when you close your eyes. He pushed food around his plate. You think we did something wrong up there? Her chest tightened. He didn't know. He couldn't see what she had. She lowered her voice. We did everything we could. But the lie clawed at her throat. The co-pilot gave her a long look, as if sensing the storm she hid behind her eyes. He didn't press. He just nodded, ate 2 more bites, and left. Elena stayed, staring at Holt until he finally glanced her way. For a fraction of a second, his grin faltered. It was enough. The next briefing came quicker than anyone expected. Losses didn't buy them time. They just sharpened urgency. The commander pointed at a new map, voice steady. Retaliation. They think we're shaken. We move again tomorrow. Whispers moved through the room. Retaliation tomorrow. Elena's stomach sank. The enemy had already pierced them once. To push forward now, without finding the leak, was suicide. Her hand rose before she thought, Sir. The room quieted, all eyes turned. She rarely spoke in briefings. She calculated every word, which meant when she did, people listened. There's a problem with comms, she said, steady but controlled. The blackout yesterday wasn't terrain, it was interference. The commander frowned. You're saying they jammed us? She held his gaze. Yes. A murmur spread. Some nodded, some shook their heads. The commander tapped his pen. We'll adjust frequencies, add backups. That won't be enough, she pressed. They knew when we'd enter that valley, exactly when. Now the room stiffened. Suspicion, doubt. She felt it like heat on her skin. Are you suggesting a leak? Someone asked. Her throat tightened. Saying it out loud meant crossing the point of no return. She chose her words carefully. I'm saying we should consider every possibility. The commander's stare was sharp, weary, then too quickly he dismissed it. Noted, but we move tomorrow, dismissed. Chairs scraped, voices rose, the room emptied again. But Elena saw it, Holt's smirk, subtle, almost invisible, but it was there. And it told her she was right. That evening she slipped outside, the desert cooling under twilight. Shadows stretched long, stars winking faint against the fading orange sky. Boots crunched behind her. She turned, hand instinctively brushing her holster, but it was Holt. It was Ramirez, a young private, barely 20. He carried his helmet under one arm, his face tight. Captain, he said softly, glancing around as if the night itself could hear him. She studied him. Something on your mind, Private? He hesitated, his Adam's apple bobbed. Yesterday, before the blast, I saw Holt. He was messing with the comms gear in the lead truck. I thought, he stopped, voice breaking. I thought it was just a systems check. Elena's pulse quickened. Proof. Not enough for a courtroom, but enough for her. Why are you telling me this now? She asked. Ramirez's eyes dropped. Because 3 men are dead, and if I stay quiet again, he shook his head, I won't sleep another night. The silence stretched heavy between them. She nodded once. You did the right thing. But inside, fire roared. That night Elena couldn't rest. She sat at her desk, lamp casting a dim circle of light. The base outside was quiet, save for distant boots on patrol. She wrote in her notebook, not reports, not mission notes, thoughts, pieces of truth she couldn't say aloud. He's inside, among us. We keep marching into fire while he whispers coordinates. She closed the notebook, pressing her palms hard against it as if to keep the words from escaping. Her reflection in the dark window stared back, eyes tired, shoulders slumped, face harder than she remembered. When had she become this? A soldier carrying suspicion heavier than her rifle, a woman who couldn't even trust the boots marching beside her. Her sister's letter lay unfolded now, the ink faded. She read it again, whispering the words, "Promise me you'll come back this time." She wanted to promise. She wanted to believe, but something told her the road back home was already burning. The next morning came sharp, the desert sun unforgiving. The convoy lined again, soldiers checking gear, tightening straps, gripping rifles like lifelines. Engines rumbled. Elena climbed into her bird. Her co-pilot strapped in, gave her a nod that felt more like a prayer. Below, Holt moved through the trucks, barking orders, laughing with men who trusted him. Men who'd follow him into hell without question. Elena's jaw clenched so hard it hurt. "Captain?" her co-pilot asked, sensing her tension. She shook her head. "Nothing." But it wasn't nothing, it was everything. She tightened her harness, gripped the stick, and lifted the bird into the rising heat. The convoy rolled. The horizon shimmered. And in the pit of her stomach, Elena knew, today betrayal would not hide. It would strike again. And this time she would be ready. How long could she keep carrying it? This knowledge that felt like poison in her chest. The convoy crept along the sand-cut road, trucks rattling, the smell of diesel thick in the air. Elena's Black Hawk shadowed overhead, blades chopping a steady rhythm against the wide desert sky. From above, it looked like strength, like order. But inside her chest, she knew the truth. This was fragility disguised as power. Through her headset, the comms crackled with the easy banter of soldiers trying to forget fear. A joke about home cooking. A bet about who'd shave first when they rotated out. Normal words, masking the abnormal. And then Holt's voice slid into the channel. Calm, smooth. Convoy moving steady. Rios, give us a sweep ahead. Her stomach tightened. She wanted to cut the comm, to leave his voice out in the static where it belonged. But she angled the bird forward, eyes narrowing at the shimmer of heat waves ahead. Her co-pilot glanced sideways. You've been starring holes through him since yesterday. She didn't answer. Look, he pressed, voice lower. If you've got doubts, tell me. She tightened her grip on the stick. Her throat burned with words she couldn't let out. He's the leak. He's the reason men are dead. But if she spoke without proof, the walls would close around her. And Holt, he'd know she was coming. So she said nothing. The road funneled them into a basin. Jagged cliffs framed both sides, shadows stretching long even though the sun was still climbing. From above, it looked like a throat closing. Every instinct in Elena screamed. Her headset crackled again. All clear, Holt reported. Her hand itched to slam the mic and call him a liar, but instead she scanned. Rocks, ledges, dry scrub, nothing moved. And then there, a glint, quick, sharp, sunlight bouncing off something metallic high on the ridge. Movement, she said. Her co-pilot squinted. Where? 2 o'clock high. He hesitated. Could be glass, could be. The explosion cut him off. The second truck lifted, flipped like a toy, smoke and fire roaring upward. Screams cracked the comms. Dust swallowed the convoy. Elena shoved the stick forward, bird diving low. Bullets ripped from the ridges, sparks flashing off armored doors. Men scrambled, shouting. Chaos thickened the air. And in the blur of fire and smoke, her eyes locked again on Holt. He wasn't ducking, wasn't panicking. He was moving with certainty toward the rear truck, hand pressing his pocket. Her chest heaved. The roar of gunfire dimmed. For a moment, all she could hear was her own heartbeat. She pulled the bird sideways, guns rattling into the cliffs. Rocks splintered, figures dropped. Her co-pilot shouted positions, marking targets. Her body moved on instinct, her hands deadly steady even as her mind screamed questions. Another blast rocked the convoy. Shrapnel glittered in sunlight. Men fell. And still, Holt moved like a man ahead of the script. She wanted to radio the commander, but static swallowed every channel. Jammed again. "Captain," her co-pilot shouted, eyes wild. "We can't hold this." Her vision blurred with dust and rage. "Then we fight until we can." The bird roared. Bullets lit the sky. Shadows scattered on the ridge. Below, Holt climbed onto the rear truck. He was yelling something she couldn't hear, one hand still brushing his pocket. For a split second she imagined it, her finger pulling the trigger, the gun spitting fire, Holt falling into the dirt. Justice. Clean. But the split second passed. She aimed higher, chewing into the ridge. Because she couldn't kill a man on suspicion. Not yet. When the dust finally settled, the basin was littered with smoke, fire, and silence. Bodies dragged, medics scrambled, the dead lay still. Elena set the bird down, rough, boots hitting the sand before the blade stopped turning. She pulled off her headset, every nerve burning. Her eyes found Holt. He was already there, patting shoulders, handing out canteens, playing the hero. The sight nearly broke her. Because none of them saw what she saw. To them he was steady, reliable, the man who kept calm when the world burned. To her, he was the match that struck it. Night again. The camp was quiet but heavy, the air too thick for rest. Elena sat outside her barracks, rifle across her lap, moonlight silvering the sand. Ramirez approached. His young face looked older now, skin gray under starlight. He stopped a few feet away, helmet dangling at his side. "You saw it too, didn't you?" he asked softly. She looked up. Saw what? Holt. He moved before the blast, like he knew. Her breath caught. She hadn't expected someone else to say it out loud. Ramirez swallowed hard. "I don't know what to do. If I speak, no one listens. I'm just a private." His voice cracked. "But if I do," he shook his head, "more will die." The weight in Elena's chest shifted. She wasn't alone anymore. Someone else had seen the cracks. She met his eyes. "Then we watch, we wait, and when the moment comes, we act." Ramirez nodded, though fear shimmered in his eyes. He walked away, leaving her in the cold silence. Elena looked up at the sky. Stars burned distant and cold. Her sister's words echoed again. "Promise me you'll come back." But how could she promise anything when tomorrow felt like a coin toss? The following day, command ordered them deeper into the region. Strike, secure, hold. That was the plan, always the plan. But Elena felt the cracks widening. Every mile forward was a mile further from safety. Every breath beside Holt was a test of patience. She flew her bird over endless sand, scanning the horizon. Sweat slicked her gloves, but her eyes never wavered. The convoy below crawled slow. Men sang low songs to keep fear away. Engines groaned. Dust trailed behind them like ghosts. And Holt's voice rose on the comms, steady, confident. A voice that could guide men through fire. But to her, it sounded like the whisper of betrayal. That night the desert turned cold. Fires burned in small pits, soldiers gathering for warmth, sharing jokes too loud for the silence. Elena walked past, her steps steady, face unreadable. She stopped when she saw Holt. He was alone, sharpening his knife, the firelight dancing across his face. Their eyes met, and for the first time he smiled at her, slow, knowing. The kind of smile that didn't say ally, the kind that said, I know what you know. Her pulse thundered, but she didn't flinch, didn't look away. She just stared back, her silence heavier than any weapon. Because the war outside was brutal, but the war inside their camp, that was the one she had to win first. And deep down, Elena knew something with cold certainty. The horizon was dangerous, but the real danger, the one that would decide who lived and who was sitting by the fire, smiling in the dark. The desert never slept, not really. It only shifted masks, heat giving way to cold, light surrendering to shadow. Elena knew this as she sat in her bird, the Black Hawk a hulking silhouette in the pale moonlight. The metal creaked softly in the chill like a restless animal. Her crew was asleep, sprawled in their bunks, but she couldn't rest. Not tonight. Not with Holt's smile still haunting her. It had been too deliberate, too sharp, as if he'd looked straight into her silence and claimed it for himself. She could still see the way the firelight had caught his face, cutting one half in shadow, one half in gold. And she could still hear her sister's voice in her mind. Promise me you'll come back. Her fists clenched against her knees. The promise was breaking. At dawn, command moved them again. The convoy stretched into a thin line of trucks, tires grinding dust into the wind. Elena's bird swept overhead, the hum of the rotors steady, her eyes sharper than the morning sun. Through the headset, Holt's voice filled the silence. Calm, precise, steady, directing trucks, adjusting formation, correcting spacing. He sounded like safety. But Elena knew better now. Safety was the masked betrayal war. By midday, the heat boiled the air. Mirage shimmered across the sand. Men in the convoy tugged at collars, sweat streaking their faces. Elena's co-pilot passed her a canteen. You haven't said 10 words since we lifted. She drank the water, metallic and warm. Nothing to say. Nothing, he studied her, not even about Holt. Her fingers tightened on the controls. He leaned closer. You think I haven't noticed? The way you watch him, you don't trust him. She cut a glance at him, sharp as a blade. Keep your eyes on the horizon, that's your job. But inside, her thoughts spun. If her co-pilot saw it, others would too. And if Holt sensed eyes turning toward him, he'd act first. The convoy slowed near an old village, half buried by sand, stone walls crumbling under years of sun and wind. Command called a halt. Soldiers spread out, scanning alleys, rifles ready. Elena circled above, eyes sweeping rooftops and doorways. The silence of the village pressed heavy, too heavy. Her gut twisted. On the ground, Holt walked among the men, pointing, steadying, leading. His hand brushed his pocket again. Always that pocket, always something hidden. Ramirez's voice crackled on a private channel, nervous, low. Captain, I think he's signaling. Quick touches like a pattern. I swear I saw one of the rooftops mirror it. Elena's chest tightened. She scanned again, sun glare bouncing off glass in a window, faint and fleeting. Her breath caught. You're not imagining it. What do we do? Ramirez asked. His voice shook. She looked down at Holt, calm as stone in the middle of the street. We wait, and we catch him in the act. The ambush came 15 minutes later. Gunfire ripped from rooftops. Bullets shattered stone. Smoke bombs hissed, cloaking alleys. Elena dropped the bird fast, guns chewing into walls. Men shouted, scrambled for cover, returning fire into windows that spat muzzle flashes. She caught movement, 2 figures sprinting across a rooftop. She swung the bird, tearing the edge of the roof apart. Both dropped. Her headset screamed with reports, wounded pinned, chaos tightening its grip. And then Holt's voice cutting through, pull back to the trucks, regroup, I'll cover the rear. It sounded heroic, selfless, the kind of order men trusted. But Elena saw it differently. He wasn't covering them. He was positioning himself between soldiers and the open desert, between their survival and their destruction. Her chest hammered. By the time the shooting ebbed, the village was burning. Walls collapsed in showers of sparks. The dead lay in shadows. Elena landed rough again, boots sinking into sand as she sprinted to the street. The air smelled of smoke and cordite, thick enough to choke. She found Holt standing with two survivors, guiding them toward medics. His face was streaked with soot, his voice steady. To anyone else, he looked like the anchor that held them steady. To Elena, he looked like the hand that pushed them under. That night the camp felt heavier than ever. Silence stretched between soldiers, the kind that tasted of suspicion. Ramirez slipped into Elena's shadow as she sat by her bird again. His voice trembled when he spoke. I caught him again. After the fight, he dropped something in the sand. Her head snapped toward him. What? I couldn't get close. He covered it fast. But I swear, Captain, he's carrying more than orders. Elena's heart pounded. The pieces were clicking, slow and terrible. The pocket, the signaling, the calm before chaos. She looked at Ramirez, his young face pale in the firelight. You keep your eyes open. Say nothing if he suspects us. Ramirez swallowed. He'll kill us. She didn't answer. She didn't need to. They both knew. 2 days later, they reached the canyon. Steep walls towered above the road, jagged and sharp. A killing ground if ever there was one. Command hesitated, weighing options. The only way forward was through. Elena's hands were cold against the controls as her bird swept the canyon mouth. Shadows lay deep between the cliffs, too deep. Clear, Holt's voice came, smooth as ever. Her gut screamed liar. She keyed private comms. Ramirez, watch him every move. Already on him, Ramirez whispered. The convoy entered the canyon. The first blast didn't surprise Elena anymore. She was almost expecting it. Stone thundered down from above, smashing trucks into twisted metal. Gunfire poured from hidden nests in the cliffs. The canyon became a trap, walls echoing with fire. Elena's bird roared low, guns blazing. Dust choked the air. Soldiers scrambled, shouting, drowning in chaos. And there Holt, moving fast, pulling something from his pocket, a small black device, his thumb pressing hard. Her blood froze. Trigger. Ramirez, she shouted into the comm. I see it, his voice broke with urgency. He's signaling the detonators. Elena's hand went to her trigger. For the first time, the target wasn't a shadow on a ridge. It was a man in her own uniform. Her heart thundered, sweat burned her eyes, every nerve screamed at once. If she fired, she'd kill him. A fellow soldier, a captain, the kind of act that would end her career, maybe her life. But if she did, more men would die. The silence she'd carried this far was crumbling. And in the choking dust of the canyon, Elena knew she was standing on the knife's edge of choice. What does betrayal sound like? Elena thought it would be a whisper, a slip of a word, something small. But here in the canyon, betrayal had its own roar. Explosions, stone collapsing, gunfire chewing the air into shreds. And in the center of it, Holt, calm as steel, his thumb pressed against that small black device. It was all the proof she'd been waiting for. The question was, what would she do with it? Her headset screamed with overlapping voices. Men shouting for cover, medics begging for a clear path, Ramirez yelling in her ear, Captain, he's doing it, he's calling the shots. She had her finger on the trigger. One squeeze and Holt would be gone. But so would her career, her name, everything she had left tethering her to the uniform she carried like a second skin. And worse, if she misjudged, if Holt had already passed the signal forward, killing him might mean nothing. The detonators could still go off. Her chest tightened, the rotor wash whipping sweat into her eyes. She hovered the bird just above the canyon floor, her guns fixed on him. And Holt looked up at her. Not in panic, not even in surprise. Almost like he'd been waiting for her to see. The firefight tore on. Soldiers ducked behind rocks, returning fire into nests that flashed along the cliff sides. Trucks burned, black smoke rising into the jagged sky. Holt ran through it all, waving men forward, pulling the wounded back. To anyone else, he was the hero in the chaos. But Elena saw the truth, how his hand never left the device, how he glanced too often at the cliffs, how the gunfire seemed to adjust whenever he moved. And inside her something cracked. All her silence, all her hesitation, all the time she bit her tongue to keep from standing out, it was burning in the same fire as those trucks. "Captain," Ramirez's voice hit again, rough with fear. "If you won't take the shot, tell me what to do." Elena's jaw tightened. "Hold, stay in position." "But he's—" "Do as I say." Her voice came out sharp, sharper than she intended. Silence on the comm, then a shaky "yes, ma'am." Her own voice startled her. Command, authority. She hadn't felt it in months, maybe years. And now it carried weight. The canyon fight dragged into hours. Reinforcements were called. Drones circled, dropping heat on nests until the cliffs quieted. When it was over, the road was rubble, the convoy gutted. Too many dead, too many wounded. Elena set her bird down in the dust and stepped out. Her boots crunched on shattered stone, her throat raw from the grit. She found Holt near the wrecks, kneeling by a wounded soldier. Blood covered his hands. His face was streaked with smoke. He looked up at her, and for a moment no one else existed. There it was again, that smile, small, sharp, private. As if to say, "You know, and I know you know." Her stomach turned to ice. That night the survivors built a camp in the canyon's shadow. Fires burned low. Medics moved like ghosts. The silence between men was heavier than the stone walls. Elena sat alone by her bird. The device haunted her thoughts, the way his thumb had pressed, the way the cliffs had answered. She could have stopped him, but she hadn't. Why? Because she was afraid. Afraid of being wrong, afraid of standing alone, afraid that once she opened her mouth she'd be the traitor. She pressed her palms to her eyes. The silence she thought protected her, it was killing her. Ramirez appeared, quiet as always, carrying 2 tin cups of bitter coffee. He set one beside her and lowered himself onto a crate. His face was drawn, eyes hollow. 17 dead, he whispered. Elena swallowed. "I know." He hesitated, then asked the question that burned between them. "Why didn't you stop him?" The words pierced. She wanted to defend herself, to say she couldn't risk it, couldn't fire on a captain without proof, but the excuses tasted like ash. Her voice cracked when she finally answered, "Because I was afraid." Ramirez stared at her, searching. Then he gave a small nod, almost respectful. "At least you're honest." Silence stretched again, broken only by the hiss of wind through stone. Finally, Ramirez leaned closer. His voice dropped. "If you're waiting for the perfect proof, you won't get it. Men like him, they hide in the cracks. They survive in silence." Her breath caught. The words felt like they belonged to her, to the silence she had carried too long. And for the first time, she wondered if Ramirez was the only one who truly saw her. The next morning, command ordered them forward. The canyon was behind them, but suspicion traveled with them like a shadow. Holt walked at the front, his back straight, his voice steady as ever. Men still trusted him. But Elena noticed something new. Small glances, hesitations, doubts flickering in the eyes of soldiers who once followed without question. The cracks were spreading. She flew above, her bird slicing through pale sky, watching, waiting. And inside her, something shifted. She was done carrying silence like a shield. 2 nights later, it happened. The camp was quiet, most of the men asleep. The stars burned sharp overhead. Elena lay awake, every muscle taut. A shadow moved, slow, deliberate. "Holt." She slipped from her cot, silent as breath, and followed. He walked beyond the camp into the darkness of the dunes. She stayed low, careful, each step measured. The sand was cold under her boots. He stopped at a ridge, looking out over the emptiness. Then he crouched, his hand dug into the sand. Elena's chest tightened. He pulled something free. A radio, sleek, foreign, not standard issue. He keyed it once, low static whispering into the night. Her breath caught in her throat. Proof. Undeniable. And still she couldn't move. Holt spoke into the radio, his voice barely above a whisper. Convoy continues east. Expect arrival in 3 days. Resistance light. No suspicion. Elena's nails dug into her palms. No suspicion. The lie cut deeper than the words themselves. He paused, then added, they'll blame the terrain, the accidents. No one suspects me, not even her. Her stomach turned, her. He knew, he'd always known. She should have raised her rifle, should have ended it, but her body wouldn't move. Holt slipped the radio back into the sand and stood. For a moment he lingered, head turning slightly as if he could feel her eyes in the dark. Then he walked back toward camp. Elena stayed frozen, the stars burning cold above her. She had her proof now, more than enough. But proof meant nothing if she kept it in silence. When she returned to camp, Ramirez was waiting in the shadows. His eyes searched her face. You followed him, he whispered. She nodded once. And her voice came out hollow. He's talking to them, guiding them, it's him. Ramirez closed his eyes, his shoulders sagged. Then it's over. But Elena shook her head. Not yet. Her voice steadied, surprising even herself. If we move too fast, they'll doubt us. He still owns their trust. We need to strip it from him, piece by piece. Ramirez stared at her, seeing the change in her. And if he suspects us first? She looked out over the silent desert. Then we don't survive. The words should have filled her with dread. Instead, for the first time in years, they filled her with purpose. The next march began at dawn. Holt's voice carried over the columns as if nothing had changed. Orders clear, tone strong, every step measured. But Elena's silence had changed. It was no longer a prison, it was a weapon. And as the sun rose over the desert, burning the horizon gold, she knew the reckoning was coming. Not in whispers, but in the moment when betrayal finally met its match. What does it take for a soldier to turn against one of their own? Elena knew the answer wasn't proof. Soldiers didn't move on evidence the way courts did. Out here, loyalty was thicker than facts. What moved men, what broke them, was trust. And Holt still had plenty of that. So if she wanted to stop him, she'd have to do more than catch him in the act. She'd have to cut him free from the men who believed in him. And that meant stepping out of the shadows herself. The morning heat shimmered across the horizon as the convoy prepared to move again. Engines coughed to life. Dust rose in thin spirals. Men adjusted gear with sluggish hands, their eyes still hollow from the canyon. Holt walked through them, his presence steady, reassuring. A hand on a shoulder, a nod at the right moment. Words of encouragement pitched perfectly to the exhaustion in their bones. He was good, too good. Elena watched from her bird, jaw tight. She'd spent years fading into the background, letting her silence carry her. But now, that silence had to change. As the convoy rolled forward, she keyed her private channel. Ramirez. I'm here. His voice was rough with lack of sleep. You still trust me? He hesitated. Yes, ma'am, more than anyone. Then I need you to start listening differently. What do you mean? Her eyes stayed fixed on Holt, striding beside the lead truck. Every word he says, ask yourself who benefits. Every order, ask yourself who it serves. Don't just follow. Question, quietly. Ramirez let out a slow breath. That won't be easy. Men hear what they want. Then teach them to hear what they don't. A pause, then his voice steadied. Understood. Elena closed her eyes briefly. It wasn't a plan, not yet, but it was the first thread. By nightfall, the convoy camped near a dried riverbed. Tents rose against the fading light. Fires burned low, their glow soft against tired faces. Elena found herself drawn to the medic's station. She walked among the wounded, their groans hushed, their bandages dark with blood. Each face pulled at her, the cost of her hesitation, the proof of her silence. A young private caught her sleeve as she passed. His hand was weak, his eyes glassy. "Ma'am," he whispered, "why do we keep walking into traps?" Her throat closed. She knelt beside him, brushing sand from his forehead. "What do you think?" she asked softly. He swallowed. "Feels like they know, like they always know." Her chest tightened. She wanted to tell him everything, wanted to confess the shadow behind their losses, but the words stayed lodged in her chest. Instead, she whispered, "Then keep your eyes open. Trust them more than you trust orders." The boy gave the faintest nod before slipping back into exhausted sleep. Elena sat back, her heart aching. She'd given him the seed of doubt, one seed. That was all it took to grow cracks in Holt's armor. Later, as the fires dimmed, Holt approached her. "Captain," his voice was smooth, measured. She rose, masking her tension. "Colonel." He studied her in silence, eyes sharp. "Then you've been vocal lately." Her chest went still, meaning. Speaking to men, planting thoughts. His smile was faint, unreadable. "That isn't like you." She forced her face steady. "Maybe I'm tired of silence." His gaze held hers for a long beat, the firelight flickering between them. Then he leaned slightly closer. "Careful, Elena. Words carry weight out here, more than bullets sometimes." And with that he walked away, leaving her rooted in the dust, heart pounding. He knew. And if he knew, the clock had started ticking. Over the next days, the pattern continued. Holt gave orders smooth and certain. Elena countered with small questions, careful as knives. Not outright challenges, just tilts, nudges, the kind that lingered in men's minds. Why did he move us through that pass instead of the ridge? Why post fewer scouts in the sector with the widest approach? Why did the fire always come from where he said was clear? The questions spread like smoke, quiet, invisible, but impossible to ignore. Ramirez carried them further, whispering in mess lines, on patrols, during long night watches. His young face carried honesty Holt's polished calm could not. Slowly, subtly, Holt's certainty began to look less like confidence and more like control. But suspicion cuts both ways. One night, Elena returned to her tent to find it disturbed. Nothing missing, nothing obvious, but her pack shifted, her gear not as she left it. She froze, hand on her sidearm. Someone had searched her. She sat in the dark, pulse thundering. If Holt had doubts about her, he wouldn't wait long. Men like him didn't leave threats alive. And suddenly the camp felt smaller, tighter, every shadow a noose. The next morning, they were ambushed again. This time in open ground, where cover was scarce and escape impossible. Mortars fell from unseen hills, ripping sand into plumes of fire. Elena's bird rose fast, spraying fire across ridgelines. Her headset erupted with panic. Trucks hit, men down, coordinates scrambled. And through it all, Holt's voice rang steady, too steady. "Regroup south, pull east flank, cover fire on Ridge 7. The orders sounded right, logical. But her gut twisted. Ridge 7 wasn't where the fire came from. It was where the men were most exposed. Her breath hitched. Holt was steering them straight into the kill zone. "Ramirez," she barked into comms. "I see it," his voice cracked with urgency. "He's pushing them wrong if they follow." "They'll be slaughtered," she finished. For a heartbeat, silence filled the comm. Then Ramirez asked the question she'd been avoiding for days. "Do we override him?" Her hands trembled on the controls. To override meant breaking the chain of command, exposing herself fully, crossing the point of no return. She heard Holt's voice again, calm, commanding, carrying the weight of authority men trusted. And she heard her sister's voice years ago, "Promise me you'll come back." Maybe keeping that promise didn't mean survival. Maybe it meant doing what her sister would have done, choosing truth over silence, no matter the cost. Elena's chest tightened. Her finger pressed the comm switch. "This is Captain Elena Torres," she said, voice cutting sharp across every channel. "Ignore Holt's orders, pull west, cover from Ridge 3, now." The silence that followed was deafening. Then a sergeant's voice broke through, hesitant but steady. "Copy that, moving west." Others echoed, the tide shifted, trucks turned, fire redirected. And Holt's voice cut in, sharp and cold. "Stand down, Torres, you're overstepping." Her reply came firm. "No, Colonel, I'm saving them." The battle turned. Ridge 3 erupted under her bird's guns, silencing mortar teams that had gone unseen. Soldiers found cover, regrouped, and pushed back. Losses still came, but not the slaughter Holt had scripted. When the last gunfire faded, the men stood breathing hard, battered but alive. And all eyes turned between Holt and Elena. Two voices, two leaders. One trusted, one doubted. The air was thick with something heavier than smoke, choice. That night camp was quieter than ever. The men spoke in hushed tones, stealing glances at Holt, at Elena, weighing the shift in gravity. Elena sat apart, her heart still hammering. She crossed the line. There was no going back. Ramirez slipped beside her, his face pale but determined. "You did it," he whispered. "They saw, they followed you." She shook her head. "No, they doubted him, that's all." But deep down, she knew it was more. The silence that once buried her had become her weapon. She broken it. And Holt knew it too. Across the fire, his eyes found hers. No smile this time, only steel. The game had changed. Why did the air feel so heavy when the room was already silent? The command center's walls hummed with electronics, screens blinking faintly, and the low murmur of radios filled the space. Yet for Evelyn, the weight came from something else, something unspoken. The mission was underway, but there was a fracture forming somewhere beneath the surface. She could feel it, the way you feel a storm pressing on your skin before a single drop of rain falls. She leaned against the wall, eyes narrowed at the projection map in front of her. The operation lines were clear, the call signs organized, every soldier marked and moving as planned. And still, something was wrong. She remembered her father's words from long ago when she was barely tall enough to see over the dinner table. The map never shows the betrayal, only the people do. He had lived long enough in uniform to know. She had laughed then, thinking it was just one of his cryptic lessons. But tonight, with every dot glowing on the screen, his warning carried a sharper edge. Her comm crackled, a voice she knew well, steady, disciplined. "Lieutenant Harris. Valkyrie 1, your timing was perfect. Targets on the ridge neutralized. Moving to checkpoint 2. She responded without hesitation, her tone calm. "Copy that, Harris. Keep it tight. Stay aware." Her hand hovered over the transmit switch for a second longer than necessary. She almost added "trust no one," but stopped herself. Saying it aloud could break the fragile rhythm the team needed. And besides, what proof did she have? Only instincts. Only silence pressing down on her chest. She glanced across the room at Captain Ruiz. He was in charge tonight. His jaw was tight, his hands clasped behind his back, shoulders squared in that posture of authority that looked natural to him. But when he turned slightly, she noticed his fingers twitching. A subtle tap against his palm, out of rhythm with the screens. It wasn't nerves. Ruiz didn't get nervous. It was something else. The memory came back sharp, a detail she had buried. Ruiz had been the one who pushed for this mission, almost too hard. While others weighed risks, he had cut the conversation short, sealing the plan with conviction that left no room for doubt. At the time, Evelyn had admired his certainty. Now she wondered if certainty was just another mask. A soft shuffle of boots drew her attention. Private Lewis, the youngest on the team, stepped into the room. His eyes darted nervously between screens as though searching for guidance in glowing pixels. He was 19, barely more than a boy. His lips were pressed tight, but she saw his throat bob with a swallow. "You all right, Lewis?" she asked quietly. He startled as though caught stealing something. Then he forced a nod. "Yes, ma'am, just keeping an eye on communications." She studied him. Sweat glistened on his brow, though the air was cool. He looked too restless, too aware, but maybe it was just youth. Maybe it was fear, and wasn't that fair? Fear was human. Fear meant you still cared what happened next. Her radio clicked again. Another update. But this time there was a pause, too long. The voice that came through wasn't steady. Sergeant Cole, hardened and seasoned, sounded hesitant. "Command, we've got movement ahead, but it's not on the brief. Looks like friendlies, I don't—" The transmission cut. The room froze. Evelyn's stomach tightened. Captain Ruiz leaned forward, barking into the mic. "Cole, confirm. Who do you see?" Silence, nothing but static. The seconds stretched, too long, much too long. And then faintly, Cole's voice returned. But it wasn't the words that chilled Evelyn. It was the way his voice trembled. "It's us. It's our people, but they're wrong there." Static swallowed him whole. Lewis flinched. Ruiz's jaw locked. Evelyn's pulse thundered in her ears. She spoke low, but every syllable carried weight. "We've been compromised." Her words hung in the air like smoke. No one wanted to breathe them in. No one wanted them to be true. She thought back to the faces at the briefing table, the way some avoided her eyes, the subtle pauses when assignments were handed out. Betrayal never showed itself in bold strokes. It lived in hesitations, in half-finished sentences, in the silence that followed orders too quickly obeyed. Ruiz turned to her, voice hard. "You don't know that yet." But she did. Deep down, she did. Because she remembered the unease in Harris's tone, the twitch in Ruiz's fingers, the way Lewis's sweat beaded under cool air. And because her father's words were echoing louder now, "It's not the map, it's the people." The comm crackled once more. Harris's voice again, but it was different this time. Strained, rushed. "Command, I don't trust the route, something's off," requesting immediate confirmation. And then another voice cut across his. Not Cole, not Harris, someone else. Calm, cold, stay the course. The voice was using command authority, but it was Ruiz. It wasn't anyone she recognized. Her eyes snapped to the comm board. The channel showed secure, yet the voice was there, slipping through, guiding them. Ruiz stiffened. His mask cracked, if only for a breath. He knew something. She saw it in his eyes. "Who is that?" Evelyn demanded, her tone sharp. But Ruiz didn't answer. Not right away. Instead, he adjusted his stance as though bracing against a tide. And in that silence, just a second too long, the truth whispered to her louder than any confession. The betrayal wasn't coming. It was already here. She steadied herself, the weight of it sinking in. She would have to decide soon, confront Ruiz outright and risk breaking command in the middle of an operation, or wait, watching, hopping for proof that might come too late. Her father's lessons collided with her own instincts, and somewhere between them, she felt the shape of a choice forming. But the mission wasn't paused. The soldiers out there were still moving, still trusting the voices guiding them, trusting voices that might already be lies. Evelyn's chest rose with a slow, heavy breath. For the first time in years, she felt afraid, not of the enemy, but of the people standing beside her. And somewhere deep in her bones, a question she didn't want to answer echoed. How do you save them when the betrayal is already inside the room? Why did silence feel louder than the static on the comms? Evelyn stood still, her chest rising and falling with a rhythm too slow, too measured. Around her, the command center buzzed with screens and whispers, but in her head there was only a ringing that said the truth had already bled into the open. The betrayal wasn't creeping toward them. It had been here all along. Harris's last words echoed in her ear. Something's off. Cole's broken transmission. It's us, but they're wrong. And that cold, unfamiliar voice. Stay the course. Her fingers hovered over the comm switch, but she didn't press it. Not yet. She looked at Ruiz. His jaw was locked, his eyes fixed on the map as though staring at the glowing icons could rewrite the story unfolding. His body was still, but his silence was loud. Too loud. Lewis shifted nervously, his young eyes darting between them. He knew something too, but fear glued his tongue. Sweat dripped down his temple, catching the blue light from the screens. Evelyn caught it, the same look she had seen in dozens of young soldiers before him. The look of someone realizing war wasn't just fought against an enemy. She took a step forward, her boots echoed faintly on the floor. "Captain," she said evenly, "that wasn't our voice on the comms." Ruiz didn't look at her. Channel must have bled. She let the words hang. "You know that's not true." His silence stretched, an invisible rope pulling tighter. Then, finally, his eyes flicked toward her. For the first time, his certainty cracked. Not fully, just a hairline fracture. But it was enough. Lewis exhaled shakily. Evelyn heard it like a confession. The seconds ticked by, each one heavier than the last, and then Ruiz spoke. Quiet, too quiet. Orders are orders. Her throat went dry, because in that simple phrase everything was revealed. Ruiz wasn't blind, he wasn't fooled, he was complicit. Betrayal didn't come from weakness. It came from conviction, twisted in the wrong direction. Her pulse thundered, but she steadied her voice. Orders aren't sacred when they're poisoned. Ruiz turned fully toward her now, his shoulders square. The room shrank around them. Lewis froze, caught between them like a child watching two parents unravel. "You don't understand," Ruiz said, his voice rougher now. "There's more at stake than this operation, than them." Evelyn's stomach dropped. Them, the soldiers in the field, the ones trusting the voices in their ears. He had already weighed them and found them expendable. She took another step closer, close enough to see the faint scar above his eyebrow, the one he never explained. "Tell me who you're serving, Ruiz." His jaw clenched. His silence was answer enough. The comm crackled again. Harris's voice, urgent, alive. "Command, we've got movement on our flank, requesting immediate redirect now." And then layered over his words, that same cold voice cut in again. "Negative, proceed. Do not deviate." Harris hesitated. She could hear it. That split second of doubt. A soldier in the field, caught between the instinct to survive and the trust drilled into him to obey. Evelyn's hand moved without hesitation. She slammed the override switch, her voice slicing through the channel. "Harris, this is Valkyrie 1. Do not follow that voice. Flank is compromised. Redirect east now." The room froze. Ruiz's face went pale. For a heartbeat there was only silence, and then Harris's reply came back, steady, certain. "Copy that, Valkyrie, redirecting east." Relief rushed through her chest, but it was short-lived. Ruiz lunged forward, slamming the comm's control, cutting the channel. His face twisted, half rage, half desperation. "You just doomed us all." Evelyn didn't flinch. Her voice was calm, but every word struck like steel. "No, Captain, I saved them." Lewis gasped, the sound of a boy seeing truth too big for him. The weight of choice filled the room. Ruiz breathing hard, Evelyn standing firm, Lewis trembling in the crossfire of loyalty and fear. And then Ruiz whispered something she wasn't ready for. "You don't know what they promised me." The words weren't anger, they were broken, fragile, the voice of a man who had already traded honor for something else. Maybe safety, maybe survival, maybe something he thought was worth the cost. Her chest ached, because beneath betrayal there was always a wound. She stepped back, just enough space to see him clearly. And what about what they promised the men outside that wire? What about what they promised themselves? His lips pressed tight. No answer, only the weight of shame, heavy and silent. The comm crackled again, Harris's voice distant but alive. Valkyrie, east route clear, we're moving, you were right. Her throat tightened. Right didn't feel like victory. It felt like survival borrowed for another hour. She lowered her hand, the headset still warm against her skin. Slowly she looked at Ruiz. For a second she wished she could hate him. It would be easier. But all she saw was a man too human, too broken. Lewis shifted again, whispering almost to himself, "What do we do now?" Evelyn's gaze returned to the map, to the glowing dots moving east away from the trap. Her chest rose, heavy but steady. "We finish this," she said softly, "and when it's over we tell the truth." The room was quiet again, not the silence of betrayal, the silence of choices made, consequences waiting. Her father's words returned, not as a warning but as a final lesson. Sometimes dignity doesn't speak, it simply acts. Evelyn didn't need to speak anymore. She had acted. She had saved them. And though the betrayal still lingered like smoke, she knew the truth had been seen. The last sound of the night was the calm crackling one final time, Harris's voice calm now steady. "Valkyrie, we're clear. Thanks to you." She closed her eyes, let the silence wash over her, and in that silence she felt both the cost and the dignity of what she had done. No applause, no victory horn, just quiet, heavy, honest. And that was enough.